The plane touched down in Lagos, but it wasn't just a return, it was a rebirth. Damalola stepped off the aircraft not as a tourist, not even as a student coming home, but as a man carved by grief and fire, shaped by years in the shadows of someone else's legacy. Heathrow had trained his mind. Nigeria was about to test his spirit. The air was thick with promise and old pain. As he walked through arrivals, he didn't smile. His thoughts were on his father, how he died too soon, too quietly, and how the world never stopped spinning for him. He wore the suit like armor. Navy blue, crisply pressed, sharp enough to slice through the city's humidity. His eyes scanned the crowd, but he wasn't searching for anyone. He was calculating. Lagos moved differently than London. It was chaotic, impatient, alive. He didn't need to adapt. He was born from this. As his Uber sped through the Lekki tollgate, he stared out the window. Neon signs flashed. Hawkers tapped on glass. Somewhere in that city was the company that defined his father's life, and was about to define his. Cosgrove Energy Solutions. His father's second home. A place where oil ran through spreadsheets and handshakes held power. Years ago, they'd made a promise, one his father believed, and one Damalola had stored deep in his chest like a time capsule. When you're ready, the board had told his dying father, we'll give him a seat. Now, they were calling that debt due. The offer came not with pity, but expectation. General manager. At 31. Young for the title. But Damalola wasn't stepping into power. He was walking into prophecy. He didn't cry when he received the offer. He sat in silence, listening to the wind through the window of his London flat. He thought of the day his father collapsed at the refinery, heart seizing without warning, hope dripping into the soil with each ambulance siren. Damalola had been in his first semester. The loss was sudden, cruel, and invisible to the world. Now, years later, he would step into the same office his father used to sweep. From cleaner to consultant to legend. That was his father's path. And now, Damalola's would begin. The induction was private. No fanfare. Just a handshake from the chairman and a long keycard that unlocked not just doors, but respect. The GM's office at Cosgrove Lekki was a glass temple floating over the city's madness. From the 11th floor, Damalola watched Lagos breathe. Horns below, birds above. He stood there in silence for a minute. Then he turned slowly and walked in. No ceremony. Just presence. His father's ghost didn't haunt the room. It filled it. The air smelled of pine polish and quiet responsibility. The walls remembered. Now, so would the world. The staff quickly took note. They'd expected a stiff returnee, some foreign-tongued, entitled brat who talked about back in the UK too often. But Damalola moved with humility. He asked names. He remembered birthdays. He spoke little, but listened deeply. Within weeks, whispers turned to admiration. He wasn't just good at the job. He carried something more, presence, patience, and an ability to turn chaos into clarity. The board felt reassured. The staff felt seen. And the women? They felt something different entirely. Every hallway became a runway. Every smile became bait. The game had quietly begun. Among them stood Vanessa. Tall, curved like royalty sculpted by precision. Her heels clicked like a gavel. Her presence made silence fall. She was more than beautiful. She was composed. Untouchable. Her caramel skin glowed beneath the office lights, but her heart seemed carved from marble. She was the strategy officer, and her work was undeniable. Presentations that sang, reports that danced with logic, and visions that dazzled the board. But behind closed doors, she burned. Not with inspiration, but ambition. Vanessa didn't climb the ladder. She stabbed her way upward with stilettos. She made power look elegant. Every outfit told a story. Tailored dresses in rich jewel tones, hair always in control, perfume subtle but impossible to forget. She wasn't trying to impress. She was trying to conquer. And yet, with all her success, she lived with a wound. The wound of never being chosen first. Promotions came, but always second-hand. Recognition came, but with fine print. So when Damalola arrived and the air shifted, Vanessa made a decision. This one will not slip away. But Vanessa didn't chase. She curated. She positioned herself just right. In elevators, in boardrooms, in whispers. A compliment here, a strategic laugh there. She watched as others flailed in his presence. But she stayed cool. Her silence made her magnetic. And it worked. Damalola noticed. Slowly, admiration grew. It wasn't just her looks, it was her mind. Or so he thought. And that assumption became his first blind spot. What Damalola didn't see was the way she treated those below her. Drivers who didn't greet fast enough got chewed out. Secretaries who wore cheap perfume were side-eyed. But it was the cleaners who bore the worst of her wrath. She never raised her voice, but her tone could cut air. Sometimes she dropped a half-empty cup on the floor and walked away. Once, she spilled tea near a janitor and muttered, "Clean it with your tongue if you must." But no one ever challenged her. Vanessa was beautiful. Vanessa was effective. And in corporate Nigeria, that often meant invincible. One Sunday, after a long week of reviews and decisions, Damalola drove to Surulere to see his mother. Their home was small but filled with warmth, ginger tea, gospel music, old photos, and the faint scent of mothballs. Mama Funmi, as everyone called her, had lived through war, widowhood, and weary years. But her spine remained straight, her eyes still sharp. She welcomed him with smiles and jolliff. But midway through their meal, he told her about Vanessa. And her face changed. Not with fear, but discernment. She chewed slowly, then looked at him. She didn't shout. She didn't scold. She simply said, "Beauty fades. Character doesn't." He laughed it off, quoting memes and movies. But the words stayed. They followed him back to Lekki, echoed through his dreams. On Monday, when Vanessa smiled at him across the boardroom table, he smiled back, but part of him hesitated. Still, attraction is stubborn. He wanted her to be the one. So he convinced himself that his mother was just being cautious. Traditional. Out of touch. After all, what did a cleaner's widow know about the complexities of modern women? But conscience has a voice. And his mother's voice had always been louder in silence. That night, as he lay on his back staring at the ceiling, an idea came. Not loud, not complete, but strange and sure. If beauty could deceive, if status could mask cruelty, what if love could be tested? Not by questions, but by humility. He picked up his phone, scrolled past emails, dialed his mother. She answered sleepy. He hesitated, then asked the impossible. "Come to my office." But not as my mother. She didn't respond at first. He imagined her confused. But then came laughter. Real, throaty laughter. "Cleaner," she said. "Me." He waited. She didn't decline. She only sighed and said, "For you? Anything." And so, the disguise began. They shopped for clothes that swallowed her elegance. Plain anchor skirts, faded scarves, rubber slippers. Her face would remain bare. Her posture would be slouched. Her pride, folded and hidden. No one would know. Not even HR. The name on her ID would be Mrs. Oluwakemi. The only truth would be in her eyes. The first day was the hardest. Mama Funmi stood outside Cosgrove's Lekki gate at 6:03 a.m., blending into the crowd of real cleaners and early commuters. She clutched her mop like a stranger. She had cleaned for survival once, but this was different. This was theatre, sacrifice, and strategy. As she walked through the lobby, no one looked twice. To them, she was another nameless uniform. That invisibility stung. But it also gave her power. Power to see what her son could not. She wasn't just cleaning floors. She was dusting off secrets, wiping windows into people's souls. The early weeks were quiet observation. She noted who greeted her, who stepped over her mop without apology, who smiled, and who rolled their eyes. Some of the junior staff offered her meat pies and kind words. One driver even helped carry her bucket when it leaked. But others treated her like a smudge, one they wished someone else would clean. Yet no one matched Vanessa's cruelty. It wasn't in what she said. It was how she said it. Her eyes looked at Mama Funmi like a stain. A mistake. A thing. And that thing remembered. Vanessa's voice was always crisp, but her words were soaked in ice. Once, she spilled coffee, looked down, and sighed dramatically. "Where's that slow woman?" she muttered. Mama Funmi walked over. Vanessa didn't thank her. She didn't even glance. Instead, she stepped aside, flicked her wrist, and walked away mid-mop. Another time, She waved her off mid-sentence and whispered to a colleague, "She smells like kerosene and regrets." Every slight was a blade. But Mama Funmi endured, quietly marking every moment like notes in a ledger. Not for revenge. For revelation. The staff buzzed with gossip. They didn't know her name, but they gave her one, Auntie Mop. Some joked kindly. Others mocked cruelly. But Damalola watched from the shadows. His heart sank each time he saw his mother shrink under someone's rudeness. He couldn't intervene. Not yet. The truth would lose its power if served too soon. So he watched, listened, waited, until one Thursday afternoon, the moment finally came. The slap. The crack that echoed across polished tiles and burned through time. That moment would change everything, not just for Vanessa, but for every soul in that building. The morning began like any other. Coffee, reports, tension. Vanessa had just lost a pitch to a junior strategist. The room applauded someone else. Her pride bruised, she stormed out, lips tight, heels slicing the air. The hallway was quiet except for the gentle swish of water and the smell of disinfectant. Mama Funmi was mopping, head bowed, back aching. She didn't see Vanessa coming, didn't hear the rage bubbling behind her. But Vanessa saw the wet floor. She walked right through it anyway. Her heel slipped, just slightly, but enough to embarrass her in front of onlookers. And then it happened. Her hand moved before her mind did. One slap. Loud. Sharp. Across the cheek of a woman twice her age. Time stopped. People stared. Mama Funmi didn't flinch. She simply stood, eyes glistening but unreadable, and picked up her mop. Vanessa hissed something under her breath and stormed off. The silence left behind was heavier than glass. A few staff looked at each other, unsure if they should speak. No one did. Because shame doesn't announce itself. It lingers like smoke in expensive air. That evening, Damalola received the report from 3 different departments. He didn't react. He just said, "Call a full staff meeting. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. The next day, tension was thick. Rumors swirled. Some said Vanessa was getting promoted. Others whispered about a surprise audit. But by 4:05 p.m., the boardroom was full. Managers, assistants, cleaners, drivers, even security guards were invited. Vanessa walked in last, as always, late and flawless. She didn't notice the elderly woman seated beside Damalola at the head of the table. Her attention was on her reflection in the glass paneling. Damalola stood slowly. The room fell silent. And then, he introduced his mother. Not as the cleaner. As the woman who raised him. No one breathed. No one blinked. Vanessa's lips parted slightly, her eyes flickering between the unfamiliar older woman and the man she'd been trying to impress for months. Damalola's voice was calm, but there was a steel edge beneath the velvet. He introduced her slowly, with reverence. The woman beside him wasn't just his mother. She was his compass. His first teacher. His moral north. Then, without theatrics, he told them all what she'd been doing. Cleaning. Watching. Listening. 4 weeks. Every corridor. Every insult. Every kindness. A test. A mirror. And someone, he paused, had failed. Badly. The tension broke like glass. Gasps floated like ghosts across the room. A few people turned slowly toward Vanessa. She remained frozen, the blood draining from her face. Her mask was cracking, and the sound was louder than the slap she had delivered. She couldn't look at the woman she had struck. Not anymore. Her knees trembled. Her mouth tried to form an apology, but no words came. Damalola's eyes didn't meet hers. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. And that, Vanessa realized, was worse. He stood tall. Not with revenge, but with grief. And the kind of silence that screams. Some people murmured apologies to Mama Funmi. Others sat, stunned, reviewing every past interaction they'd ever had with her. Guilt wrapped around the room like fog. But the only person who moved was Vanessa. She collapsed into a chair, not fainting, just folding. Her pride shattered. Her ambition muted. In that moment, she wasn't the strategy officer. She wasn't the queen of elegance. She was just a girl who mistook a mother's silence for weakness. And now, she had no place to run. Damalola ended the meeting without theatrics. Dismissed, he said softly. But no one truly left whole. After the meeting, the office changed. Not instantly, but noticeably. Drivers greeted cleaners with more intention. Secretaries brought extra snacks to the janitors. Eye contact became currency. Respect became visible. And Mama Funmi. She returned to her son's apartment in Suralere without a word of triumph. She wasn't there for praise. Her work was done. She folded her apron, washed her mop, and placed them in a plastic bag as if they were holy items. Damalola watched her from the doorway, heart torn. He had seen the ugliness of status with his own eyes. And it left a scar. He drove her home that night through quiet streets and flickering traffic lights. Neither of them said much. There was nothing to say. What had been proven wasn't just about Vanessa. It was about society, character, and the invisible rot in polished buildings. The next morning, she called him with a single sentence, "Don't let this harden you." That sentence lingered longer than any apology. Back at Cosgrove, whispers became winds. Some admired Damalola more than ever. Others feared him now. Not because he was cruel, but because he saw through masks. And that terrified the pretenders. Vanessa didn't return to work the next day. Nor the next. Her office remained locked, her desk untouched. When she finally came in a week later, the heels were lower, the makeup thinner, the posture softer. But it wasn't humility, it was shame. She walked through the halls like a ghost, every whisper like a paper cut. Some staff gave her pitiful glances. Others simply looked away. Her former allies were silent. No one dared align with someone who had struck a man's mother. A man who now controlled budgets, careers, and promotions. The Queen had been dethroned. She tried to speak to Damalola once. Waited outside his office with a trembling note in her hand. But he never looked up when she entered. He simply nodded once and said, "Please drop that on my desk." She did. Then left. That moment broke something deeper than pride. It broke hope. Because in that single glance, or lack of it, she understood. She hadn't just lost a chance at love. She had lost him. Completely. Fully. The man she thought she'd conquered with charm now saw her as a cautionary tale. Not a partner. Not even a threat. HR launched an inquiry, but Damalola didn't press charges. He didn't request a termination. He didn't need to. The wound was already public. Sometimes, consequences come not through punishment, but through exposure. And Vanessa had been exposed completely. To herself, most of all. Every morning, she now greeted every cleaner with a stiff smile. Some returned it. Others didn't. Her apologies, when they came, were quiet but late. Too late. And while forgiveness is divine, corporate memory is brutal. Her invitations to board meetings dried up. Her reports took longer to be approved. She hadn't been fired, but she was fading. Damalola never gloated. He never brought it up again. But everyone else did. The story became legend. The cleaner was his mother became a whispered warning. A reminder that the hierarchy could deceive, and that humility was the real power. Some staff changed. Others pretended to. But Damalola changed the most. He became more silent. More observant. Not bitter. Just awakened. He still smiled, but only with his eyes. He still praised good work, but now, he watched the spaces in between, the pauses, the glances, the way people treated those they didn't need. 3 weeks later, Mama Funmi returned, not in disguise, but as a guest. Damalola had arranged it without telling anyone. She walked through the front doors wearing a flowing lace gown, jelly towering above her head like royalty. This time, everyone noticed. The security man bowed. The receptionist stood. Even the HR director offered her water without asking. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply walked slowly to the elevator, rode to the 11th floor, and entered the GM's office. Damalola hugged her tightly. He didn't cry. But part of him wanted to. That day, legacy had come full circle. They had lunch on the balcony overlooking the lagoon. She admired the view, not for its beauty, but for the journey. Her husband had once stood on this very floor with a mop in his hand. Now, her son stood here with a title on the door. But neither mop nor title defined their worth. What mattered was the character behind both. Before she left, she placed a small wooden plaque on his desk. It read, "Respect the silent ones." They often see everything. Damalola didn't ask where she got it. He just nodded and placed it beside his pen. The air in Cosgrove changed. Not violently, but permanently. The hierarchy remained, but the eyes were sharper. The voices more cautious. People learned. Some too late. Others just in time. But above all, one truth remained anchored. Humility never ages. And vanity always trips. As for Damalola, he didn't chase love again. Not yet. He focused on the company, on culture, on healing what had quietly rotted beneath the glass walls. He never mentioned Vanessa. Never mocked her. Never sought revenge. His silence was enough. Her reflection did the rest. Because in the end, true justice is never loud. It is lived.